Wait, they're saying I missed the deadline? I stood in the HR conference room, staring at the timeline projected on the wall. My hands were shaking, so I pressed them flat against the table to hide it. The report showed a critical client deliverable submitted 2 days late. Cost to the company, $75,000 in penalty fees. The client was threatening to walk. Leadership was furious, but the file wasn't mine to send. It wasn't my responsibility. It wasn't even my project. I turned slowly to look at him. Devin Moss, the person I'd mentored for 3 years. The junior analyst I'd personally recommended for promotion. The colleague I'd defended when others questioned his capabilities. He sat perfectly still across the conference table, hands folded neatly, face carefully neutral. Professional. Calm. We had an internal breakdown in the handoff process, he said quietly, his voice measured and reasonable. Lysandra was leading that coordination. The file should have gone out through her approval chain. My jaw clenched so tight I thought my teeth might crack. 3 days ago, he'd pulled me aside in the break room, admitted he'd forgotten to send the file, apologized profusely, said he'd completely dropped the ball, and thanked me for catching it before anyone noticed. Now, sitting here with executives watching, with his own job on the line, he was rewriting history, feeding me to the wolves to save himself. That's not what happened, I said, keeping my voice level despite the rage building in my chest. The HR director, Patricia, glanced between us. Can you walk us through your understanding of the process? I opened my mouth to explain, to defend myself, to tell the truth, but I saw it in their faces. The decision was already made. They'd called this meeting to document the termination, not to investigate the facts. Devin had gotten ahead of this, had already shaped the narrative, had already positioned himself as the solution and me as the problem. The process documentation shows clear ownership, Devin added, sliding a printed document across the table. Lysandra's name is listed as the coordination lead for client deliverables. That document was 2 years old, created before the restructure, before Devin took over that client relationship. But it didn't matter. They wanted someone to blame, someone to sacrifice, and he'd served me up perfectly. After the meeting ended, after they'd outlined my termination effective immediately, Devin had the nerve to pull me aside in the hallway. Lysandra, listen. He glanced around to make sure no one was watching. It's just optics. You understand that, right? The timing is bad politically. There's pressure from the board about this account. I had to make a call. A call. I stared at him, searching his face for any sign of the person I thought I knew. This was the junior analyst who used to knock on my office door 3 times a day with questions, who I'd coached through every major presentation, who I'd covered for when he forgot to prep slides for board meetings. You're throwing me under the bus, I said flatly. It's not like that. His voice dropped lower, taking on that fake sincerity he used with clients. Look, this will blow over. Take a few weeks. Let things settle. I'll bring you back. I promise. I'll make sure you're taken care of. He actually believed I'd trust him after this. Actually thought a vague promise would make betrayal acceptable. Don't make promises you won't keep, I said, and walked away before I said something I'd regret. I already knew what was coming next. I could feel it in the way Patricia had avoided eye contact, in the way security had been hovering near the conference room. I just didn't know yet how I was going to respond. But I knew one thing with absolute certainty. Devin Moss had just made the biggest mistake of his career. He'd underestimated me, and that mistake would cost him everything. My name is Lysandra Terry. I'm 37 years old, and I've worked at Meridian Solutions for 8 years. When I started here, this company was barely functional. 2 floors of chaos in a converted warehouse. A whiteboard covered with impossible deadlines. 23 employees working 100-hour weeks with no real systems or structure. The founders were brilliant engineers with zero business sense. They could build incredible software, but couldn't manage a team or satisfy a client if their lives depended on it. I built the operations playbook from absolute scratch, created every process we still use today, designed the client management system, established the project workflow, trained every department head, implemented the quality controls that took us from amateur to professional. I turned complete chaos into functional structure. and that structure into consistent profit. When I started, we had 12 clients. Now we have 243. Revenue has grown from 800,000 to 42 million annually. I did that. Not alone, but I was the architect. The foundation. Devin Moss was hired 5 years ago as a junior data analyst. Smart enough on paper, good with numbers, but completely disorganized in practice. Couldn't manage deadlines, terrible at client communication, afraid of conflict. I took him under my wing because I saw potential. Taught him how operations actually worked. Spent hours explaining the systems I'd built. Recommended him for promotions when positions opened up. Vouched for him when other managers had doubts about his readiness. And the second this company hit restructuring mode, the second leadership started asking hard questions about accountability and efficiency. Devin made one calculated move. Push me out. Frame it as operational failure. Position himself as the solution to a problem he'd created. I should have seen it coming. Should have recognized the pattern when he started taking credit for my work in meetings. When he began copying my reports and presenting them as his own analysis. When he started scheduling conversations with executives without including me. But you never think someone you've helped will be the one to destroy you. You never imagine that the person you mentored will decide your competition instead of a mentor. I learned that lesson too late. But Devin was about to learn a much harder one. They didn't let me clean out my desk properly. Didn't give me time to say goodbye to my team or collect my personal belongings. Security escorted me through the building like I was a criminal, like I'd stolen something instead of built everything. We walked past the operations bay I'd designed, past the conference rooms where I'd trained dozens of employees, past coworkers who suddenly couldn't make eye contact. Some looked sympathetic. Others looked relieved it wasn't them. A few looked confused, like they couldn't understand why this was happening. We'll mail your personal effects within 5 business days, Patricia from HR told me. Her voice was professional, cold, just following protocol and protecting the company from liability. My access badge was already deactivated. My email already shut down. My company laptop already remotely wiped. They planned this carefully. Made sure I couldn't take anything with me. Couldn't send any final emails. Couldn't access any files. I walked through the glass lobby with 2 security guards flanking me, like I might suddenly become violent. As I reached the exit, I glanced back one last time. Devin was standing by the elevator bay, watching me leave. Our eyes met across the lobby. He raised his hand and waved. Actually waved. Like we were friends parting ways. Like this was normal. Like he hadn't just destroyed my career to save his own skin. I didn't wave back. Didn't give him any reaction at all. I just turned and walked out into the parking lot. I sat in my car for 30 minutes, hands gripping the steering wheel, staring at nothing. My mind was racing, replaying the meeting, analyzing every moment, trying to understand how I'd missed the signs. Then something shifted inside me. The shock faded. The hurt settled into something colder, more focused. I wasn't going to fall apart. Wasn't going to cry or spiral or feel sorry for myself. I was going to do what I'd always done, what I was trained to do. I was going to analyze the situation, identify the weaknesses, build a strategy, and then I was going to execute. Because if there's one thing 8 years of operations work taught me, it's this. Every system has weak points. Every structure has vulnerabilities. And I knew exactly where Devin's were. I'd built the foundation he was now standing on, which meant I knew exactly how to bring it down. 3 days after my termination, Meridian Solutions posted an internal announcement. I saw it because someone forwarded it to my personal email. Anonymous sender. Subject line, you need to see this. We're pleased to announce that Devin Moss has been promoted to interim head of operations, effective immediately. Devin brings 5 years of experience with Meridian and a deep understanding of our operational systems. Please join us in congratulating him on this well-deserved advancement. We'd also like to thank Lysandra Terry for her years of foundational work and wish her well in her future endeavors. Foundational work. Like I'd laid a few bricks and moved on to another construction site. Like I hadn't built the entire structure they were still operating within. He'd taken my position, my title, my team, my systems, and repackaged my termination as a natural leadership transition. I read that announcement 5 times, each time feeling progressively colder and more focused. He thought he'd won, thought he'd successfully eliminated the competition and claimed the throne. He had no idea what he'd actually done. He'd freed me from corporate politics, from playing nice and pretending loyalty mattered, from following rules designed to protect people who didn't deserve protection. And most importantly, he'd given me nothing left to lose, which made me extremely dangerous. My inbox exploded within hours of that announcement going out. Former team members reaching out privately, carefully worded messages sent from personal email addresses instead of company accounts because they didn't want their communication monitored. We all know it wasn't you. He's been planting seeds about operational problems for weeks. He's already changing everything you built and none of it makes sense. Morale is tanking. People are updating their resumes. We're all next. He's consolidating power and systematically pushing out anyone who might challenge him. One message stood out from the rest. From Ingrid, who'd been my senior project manager for 4 years. He called a meeting yesterday and tried to make me sign off on a revised operational roadmap. It's literally your framework with his name on the header. I refused to sign. He wrote me up for resistance to leadership direction and failure to embrace necessary change. I'm probably getting fired next. What are you planning? I stared at that last question for a long time. What was I planning? At that exact moment, honestly, nothing concrete. I was still processing, still working through the anger and betrayal, still figuring out how to exist without the structure that had defined my life for 8 years. But that question planted something in my mind. A seed of possibility. What if I wasn't done yet? What if this wasn't an ending, but a beginning? I spent the next week doing something I hadn't done in nearly a decade. Absolutely nothing work-related. No meetings, no emails, no schedules, no deadlines. I slept late, went for long walks around my neighborhood, cooked elaborate meals for myself, read 3 novels I'd been meaning to get to for years, saw friends I'd been too busy to see, went to a yoga class, sat in coffee shops for hours without checking my phone. People who knew what happened thought I was recovering, taking time to heal, processing the trauma of sudden unemployment. I was actually doing something much more strategic. I was clearing my head, getting perspective, letting the immediate anger settle into something more useful and sustainable. Cold, calculated focus. On day 8, I pulled out my laptop and started researching. Not job listings, not my options for employment elsewhere. I researched Meridian Solutions like I was a potential investor conducting due diligence. I looked at their public financials, their market position, their competitive vulnerabilities, their client retention patterns. I reviewed every employee agreement I'd ever signed, every proprietary data clause, every intellectual property provision, every non-compete restriction, and I found something extremely interesting. The comprehensive NDA I'd signed 8 years ago. I'd actually helped the legal team draft it. They'd asked for my input on what operational information needed protection, which meant I knew exactly what it covered, and more importantly, what it didn't cover. Devon's new operations guide launched 2 weeks after he officially took over. I saw it because someone from my old team sent me a copy through an anonymous encrypted email service. I downloaded it and started reading, and within 3 pages I was smiling. Every single section was mine. Same structure, same bullet points, same process flows I'd spent literally years developing, testing, and refining through trial and error. He'd changed the header design, updated the formatting to look more modern, added his name as the author and current date as publication date. That was it. That was the extent of his new vision. He'd stolen my entire playbook and presented it as original work. Here's the problem with stealing someone's playbook. You have to actually understand how to execute the plays. And Devon didn't. He knew how to present the system, how to talk about it impressively in meetings, how to use the right terminology to sound competent. But he didn't know how it actually worked. Didn't understand the relationships between different processes. Didn't have the institutional knowledge to troubleshoot when something went wrong. Didn't know which rules could be bent and which ones would break the entire system. He had the manual, but he didn't have the expertise. I closed the document and allowed myself a genuine smile for the first time since being fired. He just handed me the perfect weapon. I made a list of everyone who truly mattered at Meridian. Not the executives, not the leadership team. They'd already made their choice and shown me exactly where their loyalty lay. I listed the people who actually made the company function, the operations specialists who executed every day, the project managers who kept things moving, the team leads who solved problems and handled crises, the people I'd personally hired, the ones I'd trained from entry-level positions, the ones I'd mentored through challenges and promotions, the people who knew the truth about what had happened because they'd witnessed it firsthand. Then I started making quiet, careful phone calls, coffee meetings at shops far from the office, casual check-ins that seemed innocent, conversations that anyone monitoring would dismiss as normal post-employment networking. How are things going? I'd ask casually, and they'd tell me everything. How Devin was changing processes without understanding why they existed in the first place. How he was making decisions that created cascading problems. How team morale was plummeting because people felt undervalued and ignored. How everyone was just waiting for things to inevitably collapse. I listened carefully, took mental notes, asked strategic questions that seemed casual. And slowly, methodically, I started building a comprehensive picture of exactly how unstable Devin's foundation really was. The first person to officially reach out with intent was Ingrid. She texted me asking to meet for coffee. We chose a place 20 minutes from the office in a completely different neighborhood. She looked exhausted when she arrived. Dark circles under her eyes. The kind of bone-deep tired that comes from fighting a losing battle every single day. He's systematically destroying everything you built, she said before she even sat down. Every system, every process, every relationship. He's improving everything, which really means he's breaking it and then blaming us when it doesn't work. How bad is it actually? I asked. She pulled out her phone and started scrolling through screenshots. 3 people have quit in the last month. 2 more are actively interviewing and will be gone within weeks. Client satisfaction scores are dropping significantly. Response times are up. Error rates are climbing. Leadership must know. He's hiding it. Manipulating the reports. Creative data presentation. He learned that from you. Actually, how to present information strategically. Except he's using it to hide failures instead of highlight successes. She showed me more screenshots, modified data, altered timelines, carefully reframed metrics that made disaster look like acceptable performance variance. Why are you showing me all this? I asked, though I already knew. Ingrid met my eyes directly. Because if you're planning something, anything, I'm in. I don't care what it is. I don't care what it costs me. I just want out from under him. I didn't answer immediately. Just sipped my coffee and carefully considered my next words. Finally, I said, don't do anything yet. Don't make any moves. Just keep documenting everything. Every failure. Every manipulation. Every person who quits. Can you do that? She nodded firmly. Yes. Good. I'll be in touch. We had our first official ally. And I was just getting started. The second critical call I made was to Roderick Hayes. He'd been the lead investor for Meridian's Series B funding round 2 years ago. I'd worked directly with him during the entire due diligence process, walking him through our operations, our scalability potential, our risk management protocols. He told me during one of those meetings, "You're the only person in that company I actually trust with numbers. Everyone else tells me what they think I want to hear. You tell me the truth." I hadn't forgotten that conversation, and I was betting he hadn't either. "Lysandra," he said when he answered my call. "I heard what happened. That was poorly handled. I'm sorry. I'm not calling for sympathy," I said directly. "I'm calling because I think you should know what's happening to your investment." Long pause. Then, cautiously, "I'm listening." I laid it out systematically. The structural problems developing, the retention crisis, the manipulated reporting, the fact that every system holding the company together was deteriorating under fundamentally incompetent leadership. "These are serious allegations," he said carefully. "Do you have documentation?" "I have extensive documentation. And I have multiple people still inside the company who are willing to talk, on record, about what's actually happening." Another pause. Why are you telling me this, Lysandra? Because you have a performance clause in your investment agreement. If operational benchmarks drop below specified thresholds, you have the contractual right to intervene, to demand operational review, potentially to restructure leadership. That's true. Check your numbers, Roderick. Actually check them. Dig past the surface reports. I think you'll find the company is approaching that intervention threshold much faster than anyone is admitting publicly. Silence. I could hear him thinking. Give me a week, he said finally. I'll have my team run a comprehensive audit. Thank you. Lysandra, if what you're saying is accurate, and if intervention becomes necessary, would you be interested in participating in restructuring conversations? I smiled. Let's see what your audit reveals first. I hung up and sat back, feeling the first real spark of hope I'd felt since being fired. The pieces were moving into position. The cracks in Devon's leadership became impossible to hide by month 3. Client retention dropped by 12% in a single quarter. 2 major accounts, worth a combined $3 million in annual revenue, threatened to leave unless service quality improved immediately and dramatically. Internal employee surveys, which Devon couldn't manipulate because HR controlled them, showed staff satisfaction at an all-time low. Trust in leadership had cratered. 5 people quit in 1 week. All of them from operations. All of them citing mismanagement and lack of leadership in their exit interviews. Devon's response was to send out a company-wide email that was equal parts defensive and accusatory. He blamed internal resistance to necessary changes and negative influences undermining new leadership direction. He called out, without naming directly, former employees who couldn't adapt to evolution and are now poisoning current team morale. Someone forwarded me that email within 15 minutes of it being sent. I read it 3 times, feeling colder and more focused with each reading. He was panicking, making mistakes, saying things that revealed weakness instead of strength, alienating people instead of rallying them. All I had to do was stay patient and let him continue destroying himself. Devon scheduled a mandatory leadership retreat in month 4, expensive venue outside the city, catered meals, professional facilitator, team building exercises designed to rebuild trust and alignment. He sent invitations to all department heads and senior staff. 32 people total. Only 8 showed up. Half the invitations resulted in carefully worded scheduling conflicts. The other half simply didn't respond at all. The people who did attend left before the afternoon session ended, citing urgent work matters. Because while Devon was desperately trying to rally his fragmenting leadership team, most of them were quietly meeting with me instead. Different coffee shops, different times, always discreet, always careful. And every single one of them asked the same question Ingrid had asked. What are you planning? By month 4, I had an answer. Roderick called me back on a Wednesday afternoon, exactly 8 days after our previous conversation. You were right, he said without preamble. Performance metrics are significantly worse than reported. Devon has been using creative data presentation to hide the decline, but my team dug deeper into the actual operational numbers. We're not just approaching the intervention threshold. We've already crossed it. My heart started beating faster. What does that mean practically? It means I have the contractual right to call an emergency board meeting, to demand comprehensive operational review, and potentially, if I can get majority investor support, to trigger the buyback clause. The buyback clause? If operational performance drops below defined levels and stays there for 2 consecutive quarters, the primary investors can purchase controlling interest from the original founders. It's a safety mechanism written into the Series B agreement to protect the investment from mismanagement. I sat forward. Would you actually consider exercising it? Long pause. Very long. Then, if I had confidence in the right leadership team being in place to turn things around quickly? Yes, absolutely. This company has too much potential to let it die from incompetent management. What if I told you I could assemble that team? The right people, proven performers, people who actually understand how to run these operations. Another pause, even longer this time. Let's have coffee, he said finally. Tomorrow morning. Bring specifics, names, capabilities, what you'd need, what the structure would look like. I'll be ready. I hung up and immediately started working on a different kind of list. Not people to talk to, people to recruit, people to build something with. I didn't send resignation letters to anyone currently at Meridian. I sent offer letters. Formal, professional, on letterhead from the consulting firm I'd quietly established 2 months earlier using severance money and savings. To Ingrid, my former senior project manager. To Marcus, Roderick's operations specialist who I'd worked with during series Be Due Diligence. To Tessa, the project coordinator who'd been with Meridian for 6 years. To 7 other absolutely critical people who'd been systematically devalued, overlooked, and pushed aside under Devon's leadership. The offer was straightforward. Join me in a transition advisory role. Independent contractor position, initially. Significantly better pay than current salary. Equity options if a certain major opportunity materialized as expected. I explained that a major investor was actively considering operational restructuring, that there was a real chance to rebuild the company properly, that I was assembling a committed team ready to move fast if the opportunity came. Every single person signed within 48 hours. Devon didn't just lose his most competent allies. He lost the entire structural foundation holding up his operation. And he didn't even know it yet. The emergency board meeting happened on a Friday morning in month 5. Roderick had formally called it after completing his comprehensive operational audit. He'd presented preliminary findings to other major investors, gotten their support, and triggered the intervention protocol. The numbers he presented were absolutely devastating. Revenue down 18% from pre-transition baseline. Operating costs up 23% due to inefficiency. Client satisfaction scores dropped below contractual minimums. Employee retention crisis with projected turnover costs exceeding $2 million annually. Devon walked in looking confident. He prepared an elaborate presentation about necessary growing pains during transformational change and long-term strategic positioning for market evolution. He didn't know that half the board had already seen my comprehensive Countera report, the one documenting every failure in excruciating detail, every manipulated metric, every person who'd quit or was actively interviewing elsewhere, every client complaint, every operational breakdown, the one showing exactly how much damage he'd done in just 5 months. Roderick presented first, outlined the performance decline with undeniable data, showed the trend lines that made future trajectory clear. Then he dropped the real bomb. I'm formally proposing we invoke the buyback clause outlined in Section 7.3 of the series, B agreement. Bring in new operational leadership with proven capacity. Restructure with a team that has demonstrated ability to deliver results. One board member asked the obvious question. Who would lead that team? Roderick looked directly at the founders. Lysandra Terry, with a committed team of senior operators ready to transition immediately. Every head in the room turned toward where I was sitting in the back. Devon's face went completely white. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. He finally understood what had happened. They terminated Devon in a closed executive session after the board meeting. No public announcement. No face-saving explanation. Just a quiet, immediate termination. Effective instantly. Security was called. His access was revoked. They handed him the same kind of box I'd carried out 4 months earlier. He tried to argue, tried to defend himself, tried to blame everyone else for the failures that were clearly documented as his decisions. Nobody listened, because numbers don't lie. Metrics don't have agendas. Data tells the truth even when people won't. I wasn't in that room. Didn't need to be. Didn't want to be. I heard about it from Roderick an hour later. It's done, he said. The board approved the buyback unanimously. We're moving forward with immediate restructuring. Can your team start Monday? We can start tomorrow, I said. And we did. Devon texted me that evening from an unknown number. I know you're behind this. I know what you did. I made a mistake back then. I panicked. I was scared. Can we please talk? I need to explain. I stared at that message for a very long time. Part of me wanted to respond. Wanted to tell him exactly how much pain his betrayal had caused. Wanted to explain every strategic move I'd made to get here. Wanted him to fully understand the consequences of his choices. But another part of me, the wiser part, knew that would give him something he absolutely didn't deserve. Closure. understanding, the satisfaction of knowing he'd affected me emotionally. So I didn't reply at all. I blocked the number and deleted the message. He didn't deserve my words or my time or my emotional energy. He deserved exactly what he'd given me months ago. Silence and consequences. My first official company-wide email as co-owner and chief operations officer went out Monday morning at 8 a.m. Subject line: Welcome to the new chapter. The message was carefully crafted. Acknowledge the turbulence of recent months without assigning blame. Introduce the new operational leadership team with brief backgrounds. Outline immediate priorities focused on stability, transparency, and rebuilding trust with both clients and employees. And at the bottom, my signature. Lysandra Terry, co-owner and chief operations officer, Meridian Solutions. The name he tried to erase from company history. Now at the very top. Within an hour, my inbox filled with responses. Thank God you're back. We've been hoping for this. Finally, someone who actually knows what they're doing. We've been waiting for this since the day you left. Not everyone was happy, of course. Devin had his supporters, people who'd benefited from his chaos or believed his version of events, or just didn't like seeing someone return after being fired. But the overwhelming majority expressed genuine relief, because they've been living through 5 months of consequences from his incompetence, and they knew what real leadership actually looked like. A major tech publication ran a feature article 2 weeks after the transition. The team that bought back the company. How employees saved Meridian Solutions from collapse. The journalist had done extensive research, interviewed Roderick, interviewed multiple current and former employees, reviewed the operational metrics, documented the entire timeline. They detailed my original termination, Devin's subsequent failures, the investor intervention, the employee-led transition. Roderick was quoted saying, "Lysandra is a strategic thinker who plays the long game. She doesn't react emotionally. She plans methodically. That's exactly the leadership this company needs." Ingrid said, "She didn't just save the company. She saved our careers and our pride in what we do." The article mentioned Devin exactly once, calling him a cautionary tale about promoting based on optics rather than proven capability. The piece went viral in tech industry circles. My LinkedIn exploded with connection requests, congratulatory messages, and speaking invitations. Devin's LinkedIn went completely silent. No posts, no updates, no activity. Just empty digital space where his inflated professional persona used to exist. I didn't celebrate publicly. No champagne toasts. No victory party. No social media posts gloating about my return. I just sat quietly in my new office, took a very deep breath, and pulled out a note I'd written to myself on the day I was escorted out by security. It said, "You don't have to burn bridges to get revenge. Some bridges collapse on their own from poor construction. You just have to be patient enough to wait and smart enough to build a better one." I'd been so angry when I wrote those words, trying desperately to convince myself that revenge wasn't worth pursuing, that being the bigger person mattered more than justice. Turns out I'd been partially wrong about revenge, but absolutely right about patience and about building something better. It's been 2 full years since I walked out of Meridian Solutions with security guards flanking me like a criminal. The company is genuinely thriving now. Revenue up 47% from my first year back. Client retention at record highs. Employee satisfaction scores higher than they've ever been in company history. We've expanded into 2 new markets, opened an additional office, hired 63 new employees. Every single person earned their position through demonstrated merit and capability, not politics or connections. Ingrid is now my chief operating officer. Not because I owed her anything, but because she earned it through consistent excellence and unwavering integrity. Together, we've built something stronger than what existed before. Something more resilient. Something based on real trust instead of corporate theater. Devin's name doesn't come up in conversations anymore. He's not a cautionary tale we reference. He's not a villain we need to defeat or remember. He's just gone. Completely irrelevant to our present or future. I heard through industry contacts that he resurfaced at a different startup about 6 months after his termination. He was apparently pitching himself as a turnaround leader with experience scaling operations through transformational change. He'd rewritten his own history, edited out all the failures, positioned his termination as pursuing new opportunities aligned with my evolving vision. But the technology industry talks. People remember. Reputations follow you. His new company reached out to Roderick for reference verification. Roderick told them the complete, unvarnished truth. Devin left that position 3 months later. Last I heard, he was doing independent consulting, still trying to rebuild a reputation that never actually existed in the first place, still trying to be someone he fundamentally isn't. People ask me sometimes if I feel like I won, if I got the revenge I wanted, if destroying his career made up for what he did to mine. The answer is more complicated than simple yes or no. I didn't do this to beat him. Didn't do it for revenge in the traditional sense. I did it because I knew that truth and competence would eventually rise to the surface, and I had the patience, strategy, and skill to rise with them. He betrayed people to save himself temporarily. I brought those people back together and built something permanent. That's not winning. That's not revenge. That's reclaiming what was always mine and building something even better than before.